Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our another session. And I would like to present one of my friends, if I may say. He is an incredible person. To the extension of my knowledge, he is one of the people around the world who bring the world community together, and he has been advocating this for decades. I present you Frank-Jürgen Richter. He's a founder and chairman of Global Vision Community Horasis, also former director of World Economic Forum. Hello, Frank. How are you?
Very nice seeing you, Beirut, and it's great speaking to you in person, and it's a real virtual dialogue. You're in Tashkent, I'm here in Switzerland. It's a lovely day here with blue skies, and it's great to start this inspiring discussion.
Excellent. So how your daily habits have changed, how your daily routine have changed because of the COVID, and tell us more about the city where you are. What are the steps have been taken on how the life is different than before?
I live in a small village in Switzerland. There's a lake on the one side, mountains on the other side. It's very peaceful. It's a small village. There are no shops, no restaurants. It's really a rural lifestyle. And, I'm, of course, spending time at home. I'm working from my home office like everybody else. And my daily routine is that I have around 20 video calls per day. So I usually start early morning with calls from Asia and Australia, and I go into the US West Coast in the evening hours with some breaks in between. I think, you need a bit of discipline when you're working from home. There's so many, of course, distractions, and there's time with family, which is all great. But I think, the structure is good, and a bit of discipline. And I think it's now really time to be creative. As we are not traveling anymore, we have to redevelop our business models. So I spend a lot of times also just thinking. I have a rocking chair in front of my house, and I spend a bit of time just sitting there and thinking what we can do better in the future.
Well, it was such an unfortunate event, or many events around the world, but the one I was looking for in 2020 is the Horasis Global event in Portugal. I had to be in one of the panels, and it was a shame that it didn't happen. But I hope we're going to continue with Horasis, and tell us about the little future of how we are doing Horasis in 2020. What's going on with it?
We host every year the Horasis Global Meeting in Cascais, Portugal, in springtime, bringing together around 1,000 decision makers from around 80 countries, mostly from the world of business. So we have CEOs of large Fortune 500 companies attending, but also startups, entrepreneurs, and governments. We have usually around 20 ministers from various countries, also 2 to 3 head of states, the academic world, but also the media. So it's a multi-stakeholder approach, and the idea is to jointly inspire the future and to come up with new ideas and to make the world a better place to live on. So it's very much a deep dive. It's like a laboratory on the future. Now, as we couldn't hold the meeting in Cascais, we are thinking of putting some of our programs into a digital format. And hoping, of course, that next year we will again be able to hold the meeting in Portugal.
Yeah, excellent. Because I think this communication is important, which leads me to the topic that we would like to cover. Can you tell us more about the topic you would like to cover on this conference, please?
Right. We are very concerned, of course, everybody about the coronavirus, about COVID-19 and the impact on health, but also the impact on the economy. And I'm quite pessimistic when it comes to the global economic outlook. I believe that we will experience something similar to the Great Depression of 1929, with unemployment, with even social unrest happening all around the world, with populism on the rise. I think this coming crisis is much deeper than the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, because all industrial sectors are somehow impacted. And, supply chains are not working anymore. There's a lot of disruption in the world. And we're even discussing again, the future of globalization and of global collaboration. It's very unfortunate, actually, if you see also that countries just closing borders instead of joining hands, instead of working together. We are building walls around ourselves, and we are trying just to, focus on our, smaller entities. And it's a wrong thing. I think we have to collaborate, we have to join hands, and we have to jointly find solutions to make the world a better place to live on.
So basically, our topic would be the post-COVID approach toward international collaboration. We're going to speak more about that. And repeating probably you, my next question is that to the extension of my knowledge and my research, international collaboration failed big time because of the COVID. And you all kind of answered that question, but if we can kind of clarify that, do you agree with that opinion that it was a failure? And because international cooperation failed, we are seeing the pandemic at such big and unprecedented numbers.
Absolutely, I agree. International collaboration failed. There's a lot of finger pointing in a way. We always say, it's the other one, the culprit, the other one who's not doing things right, the other one who wants to take what we have. There's a lot of jealousy, and as mentioned before, closing borders doesn't really help. The virus doesn't really know borders. It can just, go from one country to the other, and we see the virus actually on small islands now in the Pacific. What we need to do is to strengthen international organizations like the World Health Organization, first and foremost, WHO in Geneva. And unfortunately, there's a lot of pressure on WHO, especially from the US, saying that WHO didn't realized and performed up to the level there should be. But I think, WHO did most of the things right. Of course, by hindsight, we can always say there should be something better here and there. But I believe that they did the right thing, already, warning early on when China closed Wuhan by mid-end January. And the WHO was always in contact with the Chinese government and giving advice. Later on, countries helped to fly in medical equipment like masks and ventilators. Now, actually, we see just the opposite, that China is sending medical equipment to US and Europe. So this is the spirit we need. We need to collaborate. And it's not only country by country, but also the private sector and public sector. I think large companies, but also startups, tech providers have a very important role to play to fight the virus. And we need a real private-public partnership framework where governments and business can collaborate. And I believe Horasis, our organization, can add to this dimension, bringing the private and public sector together.
Yeah, so the Horasis, basically what I like about Horasis is that Horasis is quite a fabric that unites that. You're exactly talking about the platform that brings, and that's why I love this organization, because you can have the discussion. You don't have a waiting line. You don't have a bureaucracy there. There are people, decision makers, policy makers, government and private sector. You can talk straight talk without any kind of discrepancy. So I think this is the future, and we're actually stepping to other fact. You mentioned the China and closing of the border. I know that you're big and expert, because one part of the Horasis is a Horasis Asia and Horasis China. So you're a big expert over there. So which leads me to my next question of a trade war. How it is going to go from now on? Are we still in a war, and are we going to get lessons necessary, and are we going to change the policy? When I'm talking about, definitely everybody probably know what I'm talking about, the two countries. Are they going to learn from this experience, and how you think, your foresights, how you think it's going to happen? And what's going to be?
The trade war is going on, unfortunately, and last year we found at least a solution, the so-called first phase of settlement when it comes to agriculture. And now we're waiting for the second phase, which is mostly looking into intellectual property rights and the collaboration on the tech side. But I think, the war goes much beyond trade. I believe that US and China are fighting for global supremacy. Who's really leading the world? On the one hand, we have the United States of America, the US, and they are, of course, the undisputed leader so far, but China is rising. China's economy is getting stronger. China is having a lot of power to Central Asia, to Europe, to Africa. China is now by far the largest investor into Africa. And they're using the tool of the new Silk Road called the One Belt, One Road to symbolize this rise to power and to global eminence. America doesn't want to accept this. America wants to balance China's outreach to the world. And that's really the concern. And war you talked about is not a war fighted with weapons, with airplanes and Kalashnikovs, but it's more like a war of ideas, a war of power, and a war also of public images and attention. And unfortunately, the coronavirus situation is accelerating, and this war between US and China, because now again there's a lot of finger pointing. America is saying that China was too slow in its answers. China is also saying America is not doing the right things, and so there's a lot of this kind of disputing between both countries. And I think now China and the US should use this time of the coronavirus crisis to set the war aside, to sit at a table and to find joint solutions. Because it's only one world we are living in. It's not a Chinese world or an American world, it's one world. And we should give up this kind of Machiavellian mindset of fighting and pointing fingers.
Okay. So, but basically, I think that for the ideologies to change, I think the holder of ideology should change. So unless we have some sort of re-elections and other people come on power, we are going to experience the same thing. But what about the future? What do you think? In one hand, you were talking about the single belt and road initiative, but on the other hand, very fewly or like almost no one talks, and especially media, about NAFTA. It is also developing, but developing under the screen. I'm talking about North American treaty, where they're adding more and more countries. So do you think that America is trying to build up certain something against that can combat the single belt and road initiative?
Well, America is kind of retreating. If you think about Asia, we talked about the Trans-Pacific Free Trade Zone for a while, and it was ready to be signed. And then the American government said, no, we don't want to be part of it. And this was almost like a gift to the Chinese government, because China is now the main power in Asia. Of course, there's still Japan, but China is on the rise. And I think by hindsight, it was the wrong move by the Americans. I think they should engage in Asia and not leave the continent. The same is true for the Middle East. Even in Europe, there's a discussion that America is leaving Europe, from a military basis, even from influence, from economic ties. And I think it's a wrong thing, because we share the same history, America and Europe and other continents like Asia and Central Asia. So I would recommend to strengthen ties, to have more trade, and not to build new Chinese walls, let's call them Chinese walls, around our countries and say our country first and everybody second. I think we have to overcome this spirit. What I'm really calling for, is to have something I call principled leadership. Leadership which is based on very high principles of togetherness, of collaboration, and not so much on the egocentric approach of my country first. And if everybody would sign or endorse such a new approach towards leadership, there wouldn't be any war, there wouldn't be any injustice between countries, there wouldn't be inequalities within countries, but also between countries. And to achieve this, we have to strengthen the UN, we have to strengthen the United Nations, the whole system, of course, organizations like WHO, but also the UN headquarters in New York and Geneva to be able to endorse a new principled form of leadership.
Understood. So I think for my next question, I'm asking it from a couple of experts, but I think you will be the best person to certain type of give and enlighten us regarding that. Coronavirus had more severe effect on FDI than global healthcare system. And what do you think, since FDI was one of the drivers of globalization, it was like it was a sort of a fuel that was injected to and help the economies to boost and help the countries to develop. So right now what we see, we have a huge retreat in direct global FDI. So what is your foresight? What do you think about the future of the FDI? And to continue this question, what do you think the recession is going to look like? Is it going to be V-shaped recession? Is it going to be U-shaped or L-shaped?
Right. I think starting with your last question and point, a V-shaped recovery, like going down, immediately going up again. It would be something more like a U-shape or even like an L. So we go down and we stay down for a very long term. And FDI, as you said, is the driver of globalization. Multinational corporations investing in other countries, using also economies of scale and the level of specialization in each country. For example, China is very strong in manufacturing of electronic products. So the iPhone, as an example, Apple is not producing in the US, but everything is done in China. And Apple is only basically doing the design and the R&D and the headquarter function. And it's really globalization at its best. I think that globalization is here to stay. We always use globalization as a means to advance human mankind. Even in the first phase of the Silk Road, 2,000 years ago, when the camels left China, went to Uzbekistan, further on to Europe. This was perfect, exchange of trade and this globalization mindset we always had. So globalization is here to stay. But it will take a very long time that FDI is back on the pre-corona level. It might take 5, 6, 7 years, a very long time, because you can't just push the button after corona and everything is floating again. I think what's happening now is that many companies might take back their manufacturing into their home markets and not outsourcing everything, just for a little cost advantage, because the security of your supply chain is important. There will still be, of course, exchanges and manufacturing elsewhere, but I think the core processes will be done back home to avoid this kind of decoupling we're seeing right now. So FDI, yes, it will come back. It will take some time. My prediction is a couple of years. So it took only like 1 to 2 months, right, to kind of lock down economies and to stop everything. But it will take several years to come back to the pre-corona level. And that's also what I feel, that social unrest will be on the agenda, that the middle class is shrinking right now in most countries. People are losing their jobs, people are on the streets, unemployment's on the rise. And this will lead to social unrest. And that's my major concern, that even countries like the US or in some European countries, people will go to the street and protest. And this will be, traumatic. Think about even last year, where the first movement of anti-globalization was in France, right, with Yellow West, even in Latin America, countries like Chile. And this will continue now, and the corona situation will make it even more forceful and powerful.
Okay. So, well, yeah, it's quite skeptic, but telling the truth, telling how it is, it's better to have a bitter truth than try to have some sort of a pink glasses and say everything is going to be fine. So, back to our topic, we said that it was a failure in a global collaboration. But what is in your mind, Frank, of your experience, knowing your like with your thinking? What do you think? What the world collaboration should look like, and what lessons we're deriving, and how we can change it? What should be done in order to change it?
Right. I think we need some new coalitions and coalitions of those who really want to contribute to global collaboration. And there are some leaders in Europe and other continents who are ready to do it. Others are not. But I think those leaders who support globalization should collaborate as a first point. We have to strengthen some of the existing global institutions like the UN, like the IMF, like the World Bank has a very important role. And then we have to look into regional arrangements like the European Union, but also supranational or super-regional arrangements like the G20. I think the G20 is also a very important role to play. And finally, we have to strengthen public-private collaboration, as mentioned before, maybe in an informal manner, but also trying to formalize it. Some companies, we mentioned Apple before, one of the largest companies in the world, their turnover is bigger than the GDP of most countries. So why not inviting the likes of Apple into a multi-stakeholder dialogue where countries can talk to some of those leading companies and joining hands. Today, with also the rise of cryptocurrencies, for example, we see that nations lose the traditional means of steering their economies. You can't really just back on your central bank anymore, but we have alternative currencies, as an example. We have alternative trade arrangements between companies. So we need to bring everybody to the table. And that's what Horasis stands for. That's what I, in person, would like to stand for, that we engage everybody in this dialogue. And we start now. We shouldn't wait until the end of Corona, but we have to do it now in the next few months. And when we overcome the crisis, using this crisis as almost like a blessing in disguise to come up with a new world order.
So basically, we're talking about sort of a wake-up call, right? So this COVID-19 is a wake-up call, and we better make proper, how to say, we have to take the lessons, we have to make right decisions right after that. And for me, the notion that you are proposing of like a G20 plus that multinational, like gigantic corporations like Apple, Amazon, and probably like Aramco, and they're more of a OPEC, but we see right now OPEC is not working. There is another elephant in the room. No one is like talking because of that. There is another huge crisis is going on because there is no OPEC plus agreement, and oil price of the oil is going down. So we see sort of another span. So no collaboration in that sphere as well. So what you're proposing is like very interesting idea, and it could actually generate a lot of, how to say, extra resources, because we know that we know what governments can bring on the table, right? And we have to, what we are saying, differentiate our resource of ideas and capital at the same time. And those companies, you're very right, they're earning trillion US dollars, and for a certain, it's like combination of 20 countries GDP, 20 normal countries. So
Exactly. Yeah, and we should also not forget civil society, NGOs, and those who try to make the world a better place. On the one hand, we have capital, we have governments, but we have also NGOs and a lot of grassroots movements, and that should be at the table as well. So again, only jointly we can come up with solutions. And what we at Horasis would also like to offer to the world is a new forward thinking in terms of scenario plannings, very long-term plans, not just like the next year or the next 3 to 5 years. And unfortunately, many governments have a very short-term orientation. Governments, for example, in Europe, get elected for 4 to 5 years. So there's not enough time to execute the new visions. Once they're in power, they're start to rethink already, and think about re-election.
Yes.
And it is a much longer time perspective, which goes beyond parties. This is like on the left or on the right. It should be always in the interest of our people, in the interest of this world, and not just in our personal interest or party interest. So long-term thinking, scenario building, and maybe we should have global think tanks working on those kind of scenarios and avoiding this kind of trickle-down effect. You mentioned before OPEC and OPEC plus. And just think about, if OPEC is not finding a solution, it will also have a lot of negative impact on the economy, especially their own economies. The countries like Venezuela, for example, or even Saudi Arabia itself and Russia. So they're so much dependent on the oil price.
Yes.
So it would be much better to find a solution now than just to antagonistically fight against each other with all the negative repercussions on our economies.
So basically, it's a lose-lose situation. No one is gaining from that war. I mean, it's just a pride war or hidden agenda or geopolitical stuff. But in the end of the day, if you are saying we just put in an equation that people first, society first, then no one is winning. So if you put the people first, then we think about their future and we come to consensus. I mean, I could not support this argument. And also, some have been suggested that actually this coronavirus would trigger many countries, especially emerging markets, to adopt digitalization. Do you think that digitalization and adapting to the verge of fourth industrial revolution and putting the government services online and making government online, do you think it will be a sort of a silver bullet? Will it help governments to somehow benefit? And what do you think about digitalization in emerging markets?
Digitalization is a key for economic transformation right now in the developing world, but also in the developed world. Think about the conversation we are now having online, and many of the processes are going digital and saving time and resources. We don't have to take so many flights anymore. I think in the post-corona times, aviation or let's say the number of flights will be still dramatically reduced. It won't be on the pre-corona level. And digitalization is the call of the day. We have to advance it, but we should never forget the human behind. Because with digitalization, it means also that full employment, lifetime employment is gone basically, and everybody is working in a small entity. It's like a freelancing economy, right? And we don't really have employment contracts and no more social contract. And it's a big danger. So the future of work and digitalization is putting a lot of people to the sidelines. People are losing jobs. Think about, for example, the hundreds of thousands of truck drivers going to lose their jobs in the US. Usually connect the East and the West Coast. But once we have self-driving trucks.
Autopilot, yeah.
And that goes in almost all industrial sectors. So digitalization, and with coronavirus, right? I think digitalization is being accelerated. So the future of work is something we have to look into. And I believe a lot of our governments don't really know as yet the kind of traumatic impact on our societies. They don't know that unemployment will be on the rise dramatically in the years to come. And that's really, something we should work on, and we should start to work on now. And one solution is education. We have to better educate our people, and not just sending them to like elite universities, but to give education to everybody. And everybody should be, on a high level, and should be a digital citizen, understand the processes, and work with digital products.
Excellent. So basically we covered, I think we can go for hours. It's so interesting, but again, we shouldn't, thank you very much. But we shouldn't contradict, and we should stay true to our concept to bring down the best. Frank has so many other videos, and please look up, we'll link down below all the links to the Horasis and everything what Frank's do. Please get acquainted, please follow him and see other his videos to see his vision, and please follow the Horasis on that essence. So it brings me to my last question, Frank. What do you recommend as a person, as a global persona, what do you recommend to global leaders around the world for better collaboration? If you just probably some of them gonna watch this, and we'll try to make sure that more people are gonna watch it. But if you had to say in a very short, condensed, boiled down way, what you would suggest to world leaders for better collaboration, what they need to do?
Right. World leaders should look beyond their borders and not just saying they're in charge of their own country, county, or city, but everybody is in charge of the world. You know, all of us in charge of nature. We should never destroy the nature. We should always think about climate change. We should always think about the trees outside here in this wonderful Mother Earth. So this should always come first, and we should forget all our kind of you know, antagonistic behavior. Maybe we should develop what I call a new approach towards altruism. Altruism means that we are forgiving a target, a goal on the short term to reach something in the future, which is much better. And altruism means that we should always first give before we take. And if all our leaders would follow this new idea of altruism and principled leadership, the world will be a better place to live on.
Excellent. I think it's a short and breathy. And thank you very much, Frank. It was such an added value. I think your view on the current issue was so important, we couldn't miss. And we are happy that among that 20 videos and 20 video conferences that you planned today, we were among them. Thank you very much. And we will definitely look forward of meeting you in a next Horasis in person. And I wish you and your family healthy lifestyle. Also, probably from what I hear, your description, you're almost perfect place, perfect hideaway, so you will be safe. So please stay safe, and for others, please join us and see other speakers covering different topics. Stay tuned and follow us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Frank.
Thanks so much, Bigris. Pleasure talking to you. All the best to you, and stay healthy as well.
Thank you.